Hi, folks. So I'm making this video today because I want to read to you an article that I found in Zero Hedge, which is a blog I read almost every day. And the title of this blog is, as I've indicated in the title of my video, The Coup is Complete, Trump is Done. And the author of this blog is a man by the name of Tom Longo. And I want to read to you his biography. Tom, I am a former research chemist by trade and an Austrian economist by study and a market analyst by choice. For the past 4 years, I've been a senior financial editor at Newsmax Media, publishing my thoughts on where markets, central banks, gold, and geopolitics meet and explode. I am now the publisher of Gold, Goats, and Guns, a monthly newsletter offered through Patreon. I have been an investor and a market analyst for more than 17 years and an astute observer in changes within the culture and the political landscape. So let me say that this guy is not a journalist per se. He doesn't have any particular expertise in any of the countries or American history or American government. But I read this blog, and I have to say I agree with every word of it. So I want to read it to you. It's very short, and then we can break it down. He writes, and this was written on Wednesday, if there is one thing the last 48 hours have proved to me, it is this. Donald Trump is no longer acting president. The coup against Trump has been completed. I'm going to keep this simple, follow the dots, and try to keep up. 1. The deep state's lies are being unraveled in real time thanks to the collective intelligence of the internet and our ability to synthesize data in real time. The Skripal poisoning and the latest Syrian quote-unquote chemical weapons attack share the same thing. Both set government officials off rushing to judgment and action before any official investigation could debunk them. 3. Trump has pissed off everyone in power on both sides of the Atlantic since coming into power. 4. He has been a material threat to powerful members of the deep state/shadow government who have unmasked themselves as criminals to avoid losing power. 5. Trump needs to be neutralized, and at this point he hasn't. His tax cuts, deregulation, executive orders against Obamacare, TPP, TTIP, and by the way, the TPP today, this is what caused me to do this video today. I read that Trump has just instructed his trade advisor, his trade representative, Michael Lighthouser, and his new economic advisor, Larry Kudlow, to investigate rejoining the TPP if changes are made. And that's the final straw for me. Okay, I'm going to continue on before I discuss the TPP more. He's attacking the current managed trade schema of Wall Street and the City of London being trade war rhetoric with China and the EU. Russia collusion narrative has failed completely. Mueller's investigation has now jumped the shark. 6. Things were falling into place for Trump, Jinping, and Putin for a wider peace framework from North Korea to the Middle East. This does not serve the entrenched powers in D.C., New York, City of London, Riyadh, and Beirut. 7. The operation to destroy Syria is at least 20-year-old idea. It will not be derailed. It goes back to overthrowing Assad's father. And I've done several live streams on this. John Bolton is one of the architects of this mess. 8. Trump's tweets right after the latest announced attack rang false. The word choice was all wrong. Tone right, words wrong. And I'm going to post this blog as well as the blog the previous blogs that he's linked to in this blog in the notes. These tweets will be used as evidence against Trump in his upcoming either resignation or removal from office. 11, they have to, in order to countermand his historic public record against intervention in Syria, as well as his publicly stated intentions to pull out of Syria real soon. And so we noticed this in my live stream of the other day at the beginning of the week. noticed this, that he had said that we're getting out of Syria, and then the next thing you know, this chemical attack, the third chemical attack, is posted, and the only people that are saying that it came from Assad's government is the White Helmets, and I've done live streams about the White Helmets and how they are not a real humanitarian organization pulling babies out of the rubble, as their PR shows them to be, but they are in fact part of the operation to achieve regime change in Syria, and they are actually working with the al-Nusra Front, which is an outgrowth of al-Qaeda, and before we started supporting them in 2014, when we called them the moderate rebels. Before then, we were calling them terrorists. And that's why Obama didn't get into Syria, because it was really difficult to know who the good guys were there. So these tweets were directly related to caused the false flag operation of the gas attack, which Theodore Postal said last year about this exact same time was not an attack from the air. This is an MIT professor, a scientist, who was able to show in detail how this was a bomb that was exploded on the ground and not dropped from the air. And Cy Hirsch also wrote about this, as well as the initial one that in 2013 that caused us to get into the war in the first place. Okay, moving right along. Trump would not telegraph his military posturing like this. Al-Shariat, Moab, he's made that point abundantly clear. 13, these tweets and past events will make a case for him not being fit for office. 14, after the U.S. and the coalition Obama and Dave Cameron could not put together in 2013 commit serious war crimes in Syria, and the reality in Duma is revealed, i.e., no chemical weapons were even used, Trump will be blamed for rushing to judgment. And they are already doing this in the hearings today that I've been watching for the last 2 hours. They're 4.5-hour hearing, and I've gotten quite through about half of them, of Pompeo. The only person who's making any sense in this, by the way, is Rand Paul. And just like his father, Ron Paul, they're also non-interventionists. And Rand said a great quote from Madison, basically saying that the powers to declare war are usually favored by the executive branch, who is want to get us into war, which is why in the Constitution they reserve them for the legislative branch. And as we know, for many years now, the legislative branch has ceded that authority to the executive branch, which has used it time and time again. Let's see. 15, he is commander-in-chief. His military handlers will turn on him in a heartbeat, and all of this will be used as proof of his insanity. 16, the headlines are preparing us for this. The GOP is split on him at this point, some openly wishing for him to fail. Now, I do think that a lot of the GOP are kind of holding their noses. They really do hate him, but they see that he's been able to get their legislation passed, which is basically the tax scam. And what's going to follow, you know, lowering taxes for the wealthy and businesses. And what's going to follow is the inevitable saying, oh, look at the deficit, how it's exploded. Now we have to cut entitlements, Social Security, and Medicare, which has been a Republican plan for about 3 decades now. 17, at the announcement of response in Syria, Trump looked defeated. He doesn't look like himself. He's done. And I would agree with that. Today I saw him do a press conference regarding the trade talks about China with the Agriculture Secretary, Sonny Perdue. And he was very clearly, his energy was down. He looked like what he called Jeb Bush, low energy. And he was clearly reading from a teleprompter. He just didn't have his same bluster. He tried to throw in a few comments, but to me, he really did look done. 18, the reality is that he's not making these decisions. These decisions were made for him, and like every other president, he's trapped having to sell it. 19, if he resists, his family dies. His business is destroyed, or he can go along, do what he can, and after 4 years leave the office in disgrace. 20, and he will be blamed for it all. His final line in this article is, I told you months ago, when you make a deal with the devil, in this case neoconservatives, you do so at your own peril. When Trump reversed course on Afghanistan, the fix was in then. He would be allowed, like all presidents, to play around at the edges of domestic policy, but the foreign policy train will not be derailed. That's what fuels the empire, that's the game, and the events of the past 4 days tell you what's what. So I generally don't read people's entire, blogs during my live streams, but this one, I couldn't have said it any better than he did. And I seriously think that Trump is, I've been saying for over a year now, basically, that the deep state, which is the military industrial intelligence complex backed by Wall Street, has been trying to do an internal coup d'etat to try to get rid of him. And, the left has been going back and forth on should he be impeached? We're going to get Pence. Is Pence worse? Yes, Pence may be worse, but it kind of really doesn't matter who's in office because, as Tom Longo is saying, and as I would agree, whether Democrat or whether Republican, the deep state / shadow government / military industrial intelligence complex backed by Wall Street is really what runs everything. And Trump is really not very ideological. I just got back from visiting my mother in Palm Beach, where I actually ran into a couple of people who know Trump. These are wealthy Republican businessmen who know Trump. They've played golf with him at Mar-a-Lago. They know him from New York real estate. And both of these men told me that he's a very nice man. And I tried to grill them. I tried to get them on camera. Neither of them would go on camera to discuss their personal experience with Trump. But both of them, who I saw on separate occasions, told me that he's a very good golfer. In fact, one said he's the best golfing president we've ever had. Like, I give a shit about that. And I said, well, does he talk about himself a lot? No. Does he talk about politics a lot? No. I said, what does he talk about? Does he talk about his family? No. He talks about sports and golf. And he's just like one of the regular guys, according to these two guys. So we know that Trump was a Democrat before. We know that he contributed to Hillary Clinton. We know that his most important thing is building his own brand and his own businesses. And I don't know how he got this ideology that he had where, they say that a broken clock is right twice a day. There are two things that he has done, and it's possibly the influence of Bannon. Now, I cannot stand Steve Bannon. He's a white supremacist and a horrible person, but I did read The Fire and the Fury, and he's very smart. The author of that book, Michael Wolff, had unparalleled access to Steve Bannon. And I really highly recommend that people read that book. Not only is it very entertaining, but you'll really get a sense of who's running things in the Trump White House and the fights between Bannon and Jarvanka, who he dubbed, Jared Kushner and Ivanka, he dubbed them Jarvanka. And Bannon, I think, had two things that I agreed with, which was anti-interventionist, anti-globalist. He wanted to get us out of the free trade deals. And that is why Trump got us out of the TPP. And as I mentioned today, I read that he has authorized Lighthizer, anyway, his trade representative, Michael Lighthizer, and Larry Kudlow to start having talks about getting back into the TPP, which is never what they said it was supposed to be, a check on China. It's really just a way to have corporate protections for all the different industries. We don't need that agreement. We have bilateral trade agreements with all the countries in the TPP anyway. So this was it. And I really want to see how Trump's base is going to respond to this. So yes, he wanted to get out of Afghanistan. He said that going into Iraq was a mess. He told Obama, he's quoted back in 2013, advising him not to go into Syria. He said the other day he wants to get us out of Syria. And now all of a sudden he's tweeting that gas killing animal about Assad, and we're going to bomb the hell out of them. And like this Tom Longo article says, he would never telegraph that thing. In fact, his past tweets have said that he would never telegraph what and when he's going to do to the so-called enemy. So it's very distressing because, I mean, I'm not a fan of Trump, of course. I'm a Bernie Sanders supporter, and I'm extremely left-wing. There's really nothing appealing about Trump except for those two things that I don't know, just by accident, he happened to have good policies on these two things that I agree with. But now, of course, he's not even abiding by them. And what else was I going to say about Trump? Yeah, I mean, the terrible things that he's doing, of course, are appointing people to head all the agencies that do not believe in the mission of the agencies and have publicly stated so and are in the position of dismantling the agencies or not following their regulations. And the EPA, of course, is the worst one. The only thing I read recently is that Scott Pruitt has been rushing to do repealing these regulations, eliminating these regulations so quickly that he hasn't been doing them by the book, and they're all going to be challenged in the courts. So hopefully he won't be able to do too much damage. I understand the regulation about lead and mercury that I was so concerned about a couple of weeks ago. He hasn't been able to actually implement the repeal of that Obama-era regulation. And then, of course, the third thing is he's been very diligent in filling positions on the courts with appointees of the Federalist Society, appointees recommended by the Federalist Society, which is an extreme right-wing conservative group that supports judges who really want to repeal decades of settled law, very conservative, very pro-business, very anti-government, very anti-individual, very anti-working person. And prior to this, the American Bar Association was the gold standard for rating judicial candidates, and now they're using the Federalist Society. So those are the three areas where I think Trump has been very disastrous. I don't necessarily think that if he's impeached and Mike Pence comes in, that Pence is going to be any better in these three areas. I think it probably is a good sign, at least for the domestic economy, the environment, social programs and such, that it looks like that Paul Ryan is not seeking re-election, because I think he clearly sees that he is going to lose, and he does not want to be the leader of the minority party that has no power. I mean, he had to sort of be talked into this position in the first place. He really did not want to be the Speaker of the House in the first place. And not that I'm a fan of Paul Ryan, so I'm perfectly happy to see him go. But I don't know, if the Democrats take over, I'm very upset with the Democrats because they've been going along with this internal coup d'etat and cozying up to the deep state even more than they ever have been before. They absolutely have no pretense of being an anti-war party. They have fomented this Cold War with Russia. I mean, Ted Lieu, who's my own congressman, is so despicable to the point where all he's been tweeting about or speaking about on the cable talk shows for the last year is Trump and Russia, Trump and Mueller, Trump and everything, to the exclusion of any other subject that the American people really care about. And as we've been saying before, as progressives been saying before, that without talking about things like increasing the minimum wage, free public college and university, reducing student debt, health care for all, et cetera, all the pocketbook issues that affect the American people, that Democrats are going to lose again in 2018. But however, I now have to revise that prediction because I think now that what they're doing with Trump, and by the way, the whole Russia connection as far as hacking the election has been proven false. Mueller isn't even following that line anymore. They're totally following Trump's business dealings and his ties with the Russian mafia. And there's a great article in Rolling Stone called, wait, where's that article in Rolling Stone? A Brief History of Michael Cohen's Criminal Ties. And this relates to Trump's lawyer, who they just raided without even the proper warrants, I understand. And like Trump even tweeted, so much for attorney-client privilege. They're basically going to try to get him on these connections. And in this article, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but basically saying that 63 individuals bought about $98.4 million worth of property, and that there's in Trump's various buildings, and that there's no question that Trump owed his comeback to these wealthy Russian expatriates, most of them oligarchs, kleptocrats, and mafioso. And in conclusion, I just want to speak about that because while I was in Florida, I got halfway through this great book written in the late 90s by Cy Hirsch. Cy Hirsch is the former New York Times investigative reporter who won a Pulitzer Prize for his reporting on the My Lai massacre in Vietnam, which our government tried to cover up and our press tried to cover up. And he also was the one who wrote about the fake. He debunked the fact that Assad was gassing his own people back in 2013. So his book, The Dark Side of Camelot, is all about the Kennedy presidency. And Kennedy actually worked with the mafia, Sam Giancana in particular, to steal the 1960 election from Richard Nixon. Worked with the mafia and the Teamsters in Chicago in particular to get people to come out to vote. And I think they had about an 89% turnout in Chicago, which is unheard of. So there was a lot of arm twisting done by the mafia, by the Teamsters. And also, they tried to enlist the mafia to kill Castro in Cuba right before the Bay of Pigs invasion, which of course they were unable to do. The story of exploding cigars, the story of trying to put a poison pill in his drink. I mean, these are very interesting stories in this book, The Dark Side of Camelot. And the other point that I want to make is that Kennedy had women coming in and out of the White House on a daily basis, high-class call girls. And this was every single day of the week, except for when Jackie Kennedy was in residence. He had very reckless behavior, not only in the White House, but when he traveled, women in and out. And he actually had venereal disease for several decades that he was being treated for. And he never informed any of his partners that he had this venereal disease, which was a form of chlamydia that was very easily transmitted. So, and then the final piece of this is that his brother Bobby Kennedy had back-channel communications with Khrushchev, with a Russian in Khrushchev's administration, the entire presidency of John F. Kennedy Jr. So all of the things that Trump is being castigated for, our beloved JFK, liberal hero, they called his presidency Camelot, he did them all. And nobody talks about this, which is why I was a history major in college and why I always love to quote my favorite George Santayana quote, which is that those who don't understand history are condemned to repeat it. So I don't know what's going to happen with Trump. I don't know if they're going to bother trying to impeach him at this point because he seems pretty well neutered. I mean, the final piece of the puzzle today, as I said, was reviving the negotiations for the TPP. So there's really nothing left of the original Trump agenda that he campaigned on. And he's just kind of saying his lines now. He looks very dejected. It seems to me that it's immaterial at this point whether he's impeached, whether he resigns, or whether he stays on, because like Tom Longo says in his article, the coup is complete and Trump is done. Later today, I will be live streaming from my Facebook page. Code Pink and the Answer Coalition and a couple of other organizations are sponsoring a protest at the federal building to try to keep us out of war with Syria. So I'm going to head over there around 5:30, so maybe about 6 o'clock. If you're not already following me on Facebook, please do. That's where I do my show, The Robust Opposition, live before I upload it here to YouTube. And that's where I do all my live streams out in the field. Saturday night, I will be live streaming from Los Angeles City Hall, where my friend Mel and his group, the Monday Night Mission, and his hashtag She Does, which is She Does Deserve Dignity, meaning homeless women are some of the most vulnerable and victimized on the streets of Los Angeles. So we're going to be doing a camp out in front of City Hall. I don't know why we're doing it on a day when City Hall is closed and none of the lawmakers are going to be in the building, but that's what it is. So Sunday night, I'm going to be reporting, and another young reporter, Madeline Merritt, is going to be co-hosting with me. So that'll be sometime after 7 p.m. on my Facebook page on Saturday. And then Sunday, I'm trying to do my show at 7 p.m. with someone from Jewish Voice from Peace about what's going on in Gaza with Israel and their killing of peaceful protesters. So for now, I'm going to sign off and say, although I should really stop using this because I had no idea that Lee Camp always ended his show, but maybe for one final time, I'll end my show with what I always say, which is keep fighting.